The year is 1854, and something completely unprecedented is happening on the Great Plains. They're putting up poles. Wooden poles, thousands of them. They stretch in a line from Fort Kearny in Nebraska Territory all the way to Fort Laramie in what will become Wyoming. And strung between these poles, these skeletal fingers rising from the earth like some kind of strange forest that's all trunk and no branches, there's wire, copper wire, thin as a finger, and it hums. The Lakota call them the singing wires. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if these history tales fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, Red Cloud is about 33 years old at this point. He's already making a name for himself as a warrior, already showing the strategic brilliance that will make him one of the most formidable opponents the United States Army ever faces. And he's watching these Army engineers, these men in blue uniforms who sweat and curse as they dig holes and raise poles and string wire. And he's trying to figure out what the hell they're doing. Because here's the thing. The Lakota understand warfare. They understand horses and rifles and tactics and terrain. They're not naive about the threat posed by American expansion. But this is something different. This is something that doesn't fit any category they have. It's not a weapon. You can't shoot with it. It's not a fortification. You can't hide behind it. It's just wire. Wire that hums when the wind blows through it. In the Oglala villages, children invent games beneath these humming wires. They throw sticks at them. They listen to the strange sounds they make. Some of the kids claim they can hear voices in the humming, ancestor spirits maybe, or warning messages from the spirit world. The grandmothers don't like it. They speak of bad medicine. Medicine that lives in metal. How can something dead, and wire is clearly dead, it's not alive like a tree or an animal. How can something dead carry anything? But the grandmothers can feel it. Something is wrong with these wires. They're right to be concerned, but they're wrong about what the threat is. At Fort Laramie, there's an interpreter named James Bordeaux, French father, Lakota mother. He lives between worlds, and right now he's got what might be the most impossible translation job in history. He's trying to explain the telegraph to Conquering Bear. Conquering Bear is a Brûlé Lakota chief, respected leader, reasonable man. He's dealt with whites before, negotiated treaties, kept the peace when hotheads on both sides wanted blood. He's nobody's fool, and James Bordeaux is trying to explain to him that words, actual words, can travel through that copper wire. Not as sound, not as anything you can see or hear or feel, just through the wire, instantly, from Fort Kearny to Fort Laramie. 150 miles? In seconds. Think about what he's trying to communicate here. This is 1854. The Lakota have no frame of reference for electricity. None. They don't have electric lighting. They don't have batteries. They don't have any of the everyday experiences with electricity that we take for granted. The entire concept of electricity as a force you can harness and use. It's not just foreign. It's literally impossible in their worldview. So when Bordeaux says words travel through the wire, what Conquering Bear hears is words travel like spirits, through dead metal, like ghosts moving through the spirit world. And you know what? That's actually not a terrible analogy. It's wrong mechanically but conceptually. Words traveling invisibly through space, faster than any horse can run. That is kind of like spirit magic. The technology is so advanced, relative to the observer's experience, that it becomes indistinguishable from supernatural power. Conquering Bear listens. He nods. He doesn't understand it, not really, but he understands something important. The whites have a new kind of power. A power that makes distance meaningless. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because the first real test of this telegraph system on the plains, its first moment of genuine historical consequence, comes from a disaster. The Grattan Massacre, or if you're Lakota, the battle where Conquering Bear died. It's August 1854. A Mormon emigrant's cow wanders away from a wagon train near Fort Laramie, wanders into a Lakota camp, and a mini-Conjou warrior named High Forehead, who's visiting, not even part of the local band, he kills the cow and eats it. The Mormon wants payment. $25. The Lakota offer payment. A horse, good horse, worth more than the cow. The Mormon refuses. He wants his $25, or he wants the warrior arrested. This should be a minor incident. A dispute over livestock. The kind of thing that happens 100 times a summer on the emigrant trails. And Conquering Bear is trying to handle it. He's doing everything right. He's offering compensation. He's trying to keep the peace. But Lieutenant John Grattan, 23 years old, fresh from West Point, never seen combat, he's got different ideas. He's got something to prove. And he's got 29 soldiers, an interpreter who's drunk, and 2 howitzers. Before he marches his column out of Fort Laramie toward the Lakota camp, he sends a telegraph message. Back to Fort Kearny. Simple message. Moving against hostiles. 3 words. That's all. But those 3 words travel 150 miles in seconds. The commanding officer at Fort Kearny now knows that Grattan is confronting the Lakota. He can prepare reinforcements. He can alert other posts. The telegraph has just shrunk the Great Plains. Grattan reaches the camp, demands the warrior be turned over. Conquering Bear tries to negotiate. Explains that High Forehead isn't even part of his band, that he can't force a mini-Konju warrior to surrender. Offers more compensation. More horses. Grattan orders his men to open fire. The howitzers boom. Conquering Bear falls, mortally wounded. And then, because the Lakota are not going to stand there and be massacred, the warriors attack. They kill Grattan. They kill all 29 soldiers. They kill the drunk interpreter. It's a complete tactical victory for the Lakota. They've annihilated a military column that attacked them. Self-defense by any reasonable standard, but strategically, it's a disaster. Because that telegraph message, moving against hostiles, it's already been sent. And when Grattan doesn't send a follow-up message, when the telegraph line from Fort Laramie goes silent about the engagement, everyone knows something went wrong. The army doesn't need to send scouts to find out what happened. They don't need to wait days or weeks for a courier. The silence itself is information. The absence of telegraph clicks is data. Within hours, other posts know there's been a fight. Within a day, they know Grattan's entire command is lost. Within a week, the army is planning a major punitive expedition, all because of wire. Copper wire humming in the wind. Now the Lakota warriors who fought at that camp, they understand they've killed soldiers. They know there will be consequences, but they can't possibly grasp how fast those consequences are forming. They can't know that while they're performing funeral ceremonies for Conquering Bear, while they're mourning their chief and debating what to do next, the entire military structure of the United States Army on the plains is being mobilized against them through a network of singing wires. This is the asymmetry that will define the next 40 years. The Lakota can scout. They can send runners. They have incredibly sophisticated communication systems, smoke signals, mirror flashes, relay riders. They can move information faster than any white civilian on the plains. But they can't move information faster than electricity, and they don't even know they're competing with electricity. Not yet, Sergeant William Rosecrans. And this is a real person, not a major historical figure, but one of those everyday soldiers whose job suddenly matters a lot. He's a telegraph repairman. His job is to maintain the line between Fort Kearny and Fort Laramie. And in 1854, in 1855, he's climbing poles in blizzards. He's riding out to fix breaks in the line. He's splicing wire with frozen fingers, and sometimes, when he reaches a break, he finds something odd. The wire isn't just broken, it's cut. Clean cut. Or it's been removed entirely, stolen. Lengths of copper wire just gone. He never sees who's doing it. But from the ridges above, warriors watch him work. Young men mostly, scouts. They're trying to understand this white man's medicine. Why does he climb the poles? What is he doing with the wire? Why does it matter so much that every break gets fixed immediately? Some of them think the wire itself is valuable. They cut it, take it back to camp. Try to use it for other things. Tie up horses with it. Make decorations. But copper wire isn't great for any of those purposes. It's too soft, too thin. A few of them notice something, though. Notice that when the wire gets cut, white soldiers appear. Not immediately, usually 2 days later. But they appear. They don't understand causation yet. Don't understand that the army is tracking break patterns, using telegraph interruptions to map where Lakota bands are moving. But they notice the correlation. Cut wire equals soldiers. It's like, and I want you to really think about this, it's like being hunted by an invisible opponent who can see you but who you can't see. The Lakota are incredibly skilled at warfare. They know how to scout, how to hide their movements, how to strike and vanish. They're masters of the territory, but the telegraph is teaching the army something that changes warfare on the plains. It's teaching them how to coordinate, how to move multiple columns in concert, how to be in the right place at the right time, not through luck or genius scouting, but through information superiority. And the Lakota, they can see the poles. They can touch the wire. Some of them can even hear that strange humming sound when they press their ear close. But they cannot see what the wire is doing, cannot comprehend that every pole, every mile of copper is a sensor in a growing web of awareness. In Oglala camps, the debates begin. What are the singing wires? Why do the whites care so much about them? The grandmothers insist it's bad medicine, spirit power that the whites have somehow captured. Some warriors think the wires themselves are weapons, that they'll shoot lightning or bring storms. They're all wrong. And they're all right, because the telegraph is a weapon, just not in any way they can recognize. It's a weapon that kills by making you visible, by turning the vast, empty plains into a mapped and monitored space, by transforming the Lakota's greatest advantage, their mobility, their ability to appear and disappear across enormous distances, into a liability. Because you can't disappear when invisible eyes are watching. When your movements are being translated into dots and dashes and transmitted to every fort within 500 miles. Conquering Bear dies from his wounds 3 days after Grattan's attack. One of his last acts is asking his people not to seek revenge, to keep the peace, to understand that war with the whites can only end badly, but the telegraph has already decided otherwise. The message, moving against hostiles, was the last message sent before Grattan died. And in the silence that follows, in the absence of any follow-up report, the military machine starts turning, inexorably powered by electricity. Guided by wire, by 1855, there are 300 miles of telegraph line on the plains. By 1860, there will be thousands. The singing wires are multiplying, growing, spreading like a web, and the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, all the peoples of the plains, they're about to learn something terrible. They're about to discover that you can win every battle and still lose the war. Not because your enemies are better fighters, but because your enemies can talk to each other at the speed of light. The age of the telegraph has arrived on the Great Plains, and nothing will ever be the same. Between 1865 and 1868, the singing wires multiply like prairie grass after rain. And I mean multiply. We're not talking about a single line anymore. We're talking about a network. Fort Kearny to Fort Laramie. Fort Laramie to Fort Kearny. Fort Kearny to Fort C.F. Smith. Lines running east to west. Lines running north to south. The army is building a nervous system across the plains. And every pole, every wire, every telegraph station is a nerve ending sending information back to the brain. The Lakota are watching this happen, and some of them are starting to understand what it means. Crazy Horse is one of them. Now, Crazy Horse is about 24 years old in 1865. He's already fought in multiple engagements. He's already showing the kind of tactical brilliance that will make him legendary. But here's what makes him different from a lot of warriors. He thinks systematically. He doesn't just think about the next battle. He thinks about patterns, about connections, about how things work. And he's looking at these telegraph lines, and he's starting to figure something out. He notices that when the wires are intact, soldiers move with purpose. They show up in the right places. They coordinate. But when the wires are cut, when warriors sever the line, there's confusion, delay, posts go silent. Commands don't get through. The telegraph isn't just communication. It's the enemy's ability to think. Cut the wires, and you cut the thoughts. This is the insight that changes everything. December 1866. Fort Kearny in Wyoming Territory. It's a new fort, built to protect the Bozeman Trail, this road that cuts straight through the heart of Lakota and Cheyenne hunting grounds. The fort is isolated, surrounded by hostile territory, and it depends entirely on that telegraph line to stay connected to the rest of the military infrastructure. Crazy Horse and Red Cloud have been harassing the fort for months, cutting wood trains, attacking supply convoys, making life miserable for the garrison. But now they're planning something bigger, something that requires the fort to be blind. On December 20th, warriors cut the telegraph line north of the fort. Just cut it. Lean through. Inside Fort Kearny, the telegraph operator, his name is Samuel Tilden, and he's probably having the worst week of his life. He's tapping out messages. Regular check-ins to Fort Laramie. Standard procedure. Every few hours you send a message. Let them know you're still there, still alive, but he's getting no response. The line is dead, and he doesn't know why. Is it weather? Is it a break somewhere? Is it sabotage? He can't know. All he knows is that Fort Kearny is suddenly alone. December 21st. The decoy party appears. Small group of warriors, maybe 10 of them. They're harassing the wood train, making a big show of it, being obvious. Captain William Fetterman, 40 years old, Civil War veteran, absolutely convinced of his own military superiority. He's been waiting for this. He said publicly, and I'm quoting here, that with 80 men, he could ride through the entire Sioux nation. 80 men, the whole nation. That's not confidence. That's delusion. And it's about to get 81 men killed. Fetterman gets permission to relieve the wood train. Takes his 80 soldiers, infantry and cavalry mixed, and rides out. The standing orders are clear. Do not pursue beyond Lodge Trail Ridge. Do not chase warriors out of sight of the fort. Stay defensive. Fetterman pursues beyond Lodge Trail Ridge. The warriors are playing him perfectly. They're retreating just fast enough to stay out of range, just slowly enough to look vulnerable. It's the oldest trick in the Plains Warfare Manual, and Fetterman is falling for it completely. Behind the ridge, Crazy Horse has somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 warriors. The numbers vary depending on the source, but the point is, it's a lot. An overwhelming force, positioned perfectly, and they're waiting. The decoys lead Fetterman over the ridge, and then the trap closes. It takes maybe 40 minutes. 81 soldiers, every single one killed. It's the worst defeat the army has suffered in the West up to this point. Tactically perfect, strategically brilliant, a masterpiece of plains warfare. But here's the thing, while this is happening, while Crazy Horse is winning what should be a battle that changes the momentum of the entire conflict, Samuel Tilden is sitting in the telegraph office at Fort Kearny, trying desperately to get through to Fort Laramie. The line is still dead, has been dead for 2 days. He can hear the battle. Everyone in the fort can. Gunfire beyond the ridge. For 40 minutes, they can hear soldiers dying. And then silence. Tilden keeps trying to send. Keeps tapping out messages. Under attack. Relief column ambushed. Situation critical. But the key just clicks into dead wire. Nobody's receiving. Nobody knows. At Fort Laramie, 200 miles south, they know the line is down. They've been trying to raise Fort Kearny for 2 days. But telegraph lines break all the time. Weather, animals, accidents. A 2-day outage isn't automatically an emergency, except now it is an emergency. A massive emergency. The worst loss of American soldiers in years. And nobody knows because the telegraph is cut. It takes 3 days for a courier to reach Fort Laramie with the news. 3 days. In that time, with a functioning telegraph, the army could have mobilized. Could have sent reinforcements, could have coordinated a response. Instead, they're blind, and this is what Crazy Horse has figured out. The telegraph is a weapon, but it's a weapon that works both ways. Cut the wire and the weapon cuts the enemy. Now, in Omaha, at the Central Telegraph Office that coordinates all military communications in the department. Of the Platte, there's an operator who's been watching the fort. Fort Kearny situation with growing concern. He's been sending regular queries to the silent post, getting nothing back. He's mapped out the line, tried to figure out where the break might be. He's following protocol. But what he can't know is that the silence means death, that the absence of clicks means disaster. Because the telegraph has made silence informative. Before the telegraph, silence was just silence, normal, expected. But now, in 1866, silence has meaning. Silence is data. When the news finally arrives at Fort Laramie, when the courier staggers in with the story of Fetterman's command wiped out, the telegraph office erupts. Messages flying in every direction. To Omaha, to Washington, to every post on the plains. Within hours, every commander knows. Within days, newspapers across the country are printing the story. The Fetterman Massacre, they call it. A disaster. A humiliation. But among the Lakota and Cheyenne, they're celebrating the victory. They're counting coup. They're recounting the battle. And they're noticing something. The soldiers didn't come. The relief forces that always show up when the singing wires are working, they didn't come. Because the wires weren't singing, Red Cloud's warriors start to pay attention to the telegraph lines in a new way. Not as mysterious medicine, not as spirit wires, but as tools. Tools the whites need. Tools that can be broken. Over the next year, 1867, the telegraph warfare intensifies. Warriors cut lines systematically. Not randomly, not just when they happen upon them, but strategically. Before attacks, before movements. Creating zones of silence. And here's where it gets complicated. Because the warriors are using captured telegraph wire for their own purposes now. They're taking the copper wire and using it to bind prisoners. They're melting down the glass insulators, those glass knobs that keep the wire separate from the wooden poles, and turning them into bullets. There's something deeply symbolic about that. Taking the white man's communication technology and literally turning it into weapons to fight back. But, and this is crucial, they still don't understand the full picture. They understand that cutting wires creates confusion. That's valuable knowledge. But they don't understand that every cut also reveals their location. That the army is learning to read the pattern of breaks. That telegraph operators are mapping where lines get cut and using that information to predict where Lakota bands are operating. Every cut is a signal. Every break is intelligence. The Lakota are trying to make the whites blind, but they're also making themselves visible in the process. There's a Lakota woman named Mary Blackfoot during this period. She's married to a white trader, lives between two worlds. Her brother is a warrior, rides with the war parties, participates in the raids on the Bozeman Trail. Her husband works with the army, translates messages, and sometimes those messages are about her brother's war party, about their movements, about plans to intercept them. Can you imagine that position? Your brother is fighting for your people's survival. Your husband is helping the people trying to kill your brother. And you're sitting there, watching both worlds tear each other apart, unable to stop either one. Mary hears the telegraph key clicking in her husband's office. Hears him translating the dots and dashes into words about hostiles spotted and war party moving north. She knows what those words mean. Knows they're about her people, maybe about her brother specifically, but what can she do? Warn her brother, she betrays her husband. Stay silent, she betrays her family. She's connected to both worlds by invisible copper threads, and those threads are strangling her. This is happening all across the plains in different forms. Mixed blood families, traders married to native women, scouts working for the army, interpreters, people who exist in the spaces between cultures, and the telegraph is making those spaces smaller, harder to navigate, more dangerous. 1868. The Medicine Lodge Treaty negotiations. The peace commissioners arrive from Washington. They're supposed to negotiate a lasting peace with the Southern Plains tribes. Kiowa, Comanche, Cheyenne, Arapaho. It's this big diplomatic initiative. Thousands of native people gathered, speeches, ceremonies, the whole formal process. But here's what's different about these negotiations compared to every treaty negotiation that came before. There's a telegraph line right there at Medicine Lodge Creek in Kansas, and the commissioners are sending real-time reports back to Washington. Real-time. Think about that. Every speech, every proposal, every counteroffer. It's being encoded and sent to Washington within hours. The government officials back east are reading about negotiations the same day they happen. They're sending back instructions, modifying positions. This isn't negotiation between two parties meeting in good faith. This is negotiation with one party consulting a distant authority who can respond instantly. Roman Nose is there. Southern Cheyenne warrior, respected leader. He speaks at Medicine Lodge, and his words are going to haunt everyone who hears them. He says the whites talk about peace, but bring war. That treaties are just paper that blows away. That his people want only to live as they always have, following the buffalo. He speaks with power and dignity, and the commissioners write down his words and send them by telegraph to Washington, where officials read them and make plans that will destroy. Everything Roman Nose is fighting to preserve. Roman Nose will die the next year at the Battle of Beecher Island, shot through the spine, and the telegram announcing his death will reach Washington before his body is cold. That's the world the telegraph has created. A world where victories and defeats, births and deaths, speeches and battles all collapse into the same temporal space. Where distance means nothing and everything happens in a kind of horrible simultaneity. The Lakota and Cheyenne win battles. They win a lot of battles. They're better fighters, better tacticians, better adapted to the territory. But they're losing the war. And they're losing it because they're fighting an enemy who can think faster than they can move. In the summer of 1868, Red Cloud achieves something remarkable. He forces the United States Army to abandon the Bozeman Trail, to close Fort Kearny, Fort C.F. Smith, Fort Reno, to withdraw. It's a complete strategic victory. Red Cloud's war ends with the Lakota winning, except the telegraph lines stay up. The poles remain. The wires keep humming, and the army is learning, adapting, figuring out how to use this technology, not just for communication, but for something else. Something more dangerous, intelligence, surveillance, control. The singing wires are evolving, and in the next phase, they're going to become something the Lakota can't fight, can't cut, can't escape. They're going to become eyes. Between 1869 and 1874, something fundamental changes about the telegraph on the plains. It stops being just a communication tool. It becomes an intelligence network, a surveillance system. The army figures out that those wires can do more than carry orders. They can carry information about the enemy. And that information, collected systematically, analyzed carefully, distributed strategically, that information becomes more powerful than cavalry. General Philip Sheridan is the architect of this transformation. Sheridan is short, 5 feet 5 inches. He's got a temper. He's ruthless, and he's absolutely brilliant at logistics and intelligence. During the Civil War, he pioneered the use of telegraph networks to coordinate cavalry operations. Now he's in charge of the Division of the Missouri, basically all the army operations on the Great Plains, and he's applying everything he learned. But here's his innovation. He doesn't just use telegraphs to talk to his own officers. He uses them to build an intelligence network. The Pawnee have been enemies of the Lakota for generations, centuries maybe, long before white people showed up. It's deep cultural, fundamental enmity. The Crow, same thing. They hate the Lakota. The Lakota have been pushing into their territories, taking their hunting grounds, killing their people. These aren't philosophical differences. This is blood feud level hatred. Sheridan looks at this situation and sees opportunity. He recruits Pawnee scouts, Crow scouts, pays them, arms them, trains them. And here's the crucial part. He stations them near telegraph offices, at forts, at relay stations. Anywhere there's a telegraph key. Now, when a Pawnee scout spots a Lakota camp, he doesn't have to ride back to the fort himself. He just has to get the information to the nearest telegraph station. And from there, that intelligence travels at the speed of light to every commander who needs it. The ancient rivalry between the Pawnee and the Sioux gets electrified, literally, gets transmitted through copper wire to become instant, actionable military intelligence. Think about what this does to warfare on the plains. Before, if you were Lakota, you had to worry about Pawnee scouts spotting you. But Pawnee scouts had to travel to report what they saw. You had time, days maybe, enough time to move camp, change position, adapt. Now, a Pawnee scout spots your camp at dawn. By noon, every fort within 300 miles knows where you are. By sunset, cavalry columns are moving to intercept. The time between observation and action has collapsed from days to hours. At Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota Territory, there's a woman watching all this happen with growing unease. Elizabeth Custer, wife of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, and she's watching her husband become obsessed with maps. Custer's quarters have maps everywhere, big maps pinned to the walls, and on those maps pins, little colored pins marking Lakota camps. Red string connecting the pins to telegraph stations. It looks like a spider web, because that's what it is. A web of information with telegraph wires as the strands. Elizabeth watches George study these maps for hours. He's tracking patterns. Where do Lakota bands winter? Where do they hunt in summer? What routes do they travel? And every piece of information, from scouts, from traders, from friendly Indians, from captured prisoners, it all gets telegraphed to Fort Abraham Lincoln, and George adds another pin to his map. He can see, in a way that no commander before him could see, the movements of entire peoples across hundreds of miles. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to be dangerous. Now here's where it gets really disturbing. Because this intelligence network isn't just tracking warriors, it's tracking buffalo. The buffalo herds on the Great Plains in 1870 are still enormous. Millions of animals. The Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, their entire way of life depends on these herds. Food, shelter, clothing, tools, everything comes from buffalo. The hide hunters are moving onto the plains in force. Professional hunters with big rifles, Sharps rifles that can kill a buffalo at 500 yards. These aren't subsistence hunters. These are commercial operations. They kill buffalo by the thousands, take the hides, leave the carcasses to rot, and they're using telegraphs to coordinate their hunts. A hunting party spots a herd. They telegraph the location to other hunting parties. Multiple groups converge on the herd from different directions. They kill more efficiently, more completely, and when they're done, when a herd is decimated, they telegraph ahead to find the next one. The Lakota can't hunt buffalo without telegraphs alerting hide hunters to their location. A Lakota band moves toward a herd, and Pawnee scouts report it. The report goes by telegraph to the nearest fort. The fort commander, who's also talking to hide hunters because everyone's using the same telegraph network, he knows where the Lakota are heading. Hide hunters get there first. Kill the herd. Move on. It's not just warfare. It's economic destruction transmitted at light speed. Between 1870 and 1874, 13 million buffalo die on the southern plains. 13 million. The northern herd is being hunted nearly as hard, and the whole slaughter is being coordinated through telegraph wires. Sitting Bull is watching his people starve. Not because there are no buffalo. There are still buffalo, just fewer and harder to find. But because every time his hunters find a herd, somehow white hunters show up. Somehow soldiers appear. The game has changed, and he doesn't understand how. His medicine tells him to avoid the whites, to stay away from their forts and trails. And he does. He keeps his bands far from white settlements. But it doesn't matter. They still get found, still get intercepted. The distance that's supposed to protect them doesn't protect them anymore. There's a Cheyenne warrior named White Thunder who participates in a raid on Julesburg Station in Colorado in January 1865. It's a successful raid. They overrun the station, kill the soldiers, burn the buildings. And White Thunder finds something interesting in the wreckage, a telegraph key. This little device that the operator was using to send messages. It's got a brass lever, a spring, a contact point. White Thunder has seen operators using these things, tapping on them, making clicking sounds, and somehow those clicks become words. On the other end of the wire, he takes it, brings it back to his band, gives it to the medicine man, because surely this is powerful medicine, right? This little brass device that carries words. The medicine man performs ceremonies for 4 days, chanting, praying, burning sacred herbs, trying to make the telegraph key speak, trying to unlock its power. White Thunder watches. Other warriors watch. They're all waiting for the medicine to work, for the key to reveal its secrets. Nothing happens. Because of course nothing happens. The telegraph key isn't magic. It's not even particularly complicated technology. It's just a switch. A button that completes an electrical circuit. Without the wire, without the battery, without the receiving station and the operator who knows Morse code, without the entire network, it's just a piece of brass. Useless. But White Thunder and his medicine man don't know that. They don't understand that the power isn't in the device. The power is in the connection, in the network. You can't capture network power by taking a piece of the network. You have to understand the whole system, and the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, they can't see the whole system. They see the poles, they see the wires, they see the telegraph stations, but they can't see the network, can't visualize this invisible web of information that's tightening around them. By 1873, patterns are becoming visible to Lakota warriors. Troubling patterns. Soldiers show up 2 days after camps move. Not immediately. 2 days. Why 2 days? Because that's how long it takes for scouts to report to a telegraph station, for the message to be transmitted, and for cavalry to ride to the location. It's reliable, predictable, like clockwork. Patrols appear at river crossings before war parties reach them. How do they know? How do they know which river, which crossing, which day? Supply convoys have military escorts exactly when and where they need them. Not everywhere. Just where Lakota bands are operating. As if someone is telling them where to send the escorts, the warriors start talking about it. Around fires, during councils, something is wrong. The whites are always in the right place, always ready, always warned. Some think it's traitors. Lakota scouts working for the army, which is true, there are some. But that doesn't explain everything. A few scouts can't account for the breadth of intelligence the army seems to have. Some think it's the singing wires, that somehow the wires are watching them, seeing them. There's truth in that too, but they're thinking of it supernaturally, as if the wires themselves have eyes. The reality is both simpler and more terrifying. The wires don't have eyes, but they're connected to hundreds of eyes. Pawnee eyes, crow eyes, eyes that hate the Lakota and are willing to work with the whites to destroy them. And all those eyes are connected to a nervous system that can transmit what they see instantly across the entire plains. Sitting, Bull's band discovers they're being tracked when they try to go on a buffalo hunt in the fall of 1873. They spot a herd, good-sized herd, maybe 300 animals. They're preparing for the hunt, sending prayers, making ready. Before they can approach the herd, white hide hunters appear. 20 men with big rifles. They set up positions. They start killing buffalo. The Lakota warriors could attack the hunters, probably drive them off or kill them. But that would mean fighting, which would mean telegraphs reporting hostile activity, which would mean cavalry. So they watch white men kill their food, kill their survival, kill their future. And then the hide hunters leave, taking hides, abandoning carcasses. The herd is scattered, ruined. The Lakota go hungry. This happens over and over. Different bands, different locations, same result. The buffalo they need are being killed by people who don't need them. And it's all being coordinated through singing wires. At Fort Laramie, there's a telegraph operator, junior enlisted, nobody important, who keeps a personal log. Years later, his grandson will donate it to a historical society. In it, there are entries like this. November 12th. Pawnee Scout reports Sioux camp on Powder River, sent to Fort Fetterman. They're dispatching cavalry. November 18th. Hide hunters request locations of Indian camps to avoid conflict. Provided coordinates from last week's scouting reports. Read that again. Hide hunters request locations of Indian camps to avoid conflict. That's the official reason. To avoid conflict. But here's what actually happens. Hide hunters get Indian locations and use them to find herds. Because if Indians are in an area, buffalo are in that area. The hunters aren't avoiding Indians. They're using Indian locations to find game. And the army, which is supposed to be neutral in commercial hunting operations, is providing military intelligence to commercial hunters. It's not a conspiracy. Nobody's sitting in Washington ordering this. It's just convenient. The telegraph network exists. The information exists. The hunters ask for it. Why not share? What's the harm? The harm is the systematic destruction of the economic foundation of Plains Indian life, coordinated through military communications infrastructure. In peacetime, by 1874, the northern buffalo herd is in trouble. Not gone, not yet, but noticeably smaller, harder to find. And every Lakota, every Cheyenne, every Arapaho who depends on buffalo is feeling it. They're getting hungry. Their children are getting hungry, and they can't figure out why the buffalo are disappearing so fast. Herds that numbered in the tens of thousands just a few years ago are now in the hundreds. Something is killing the buffalo faster than the buffalo can reproduce. That something is telegraphs, is information, is the transformation of the Great Plains from an unmapped wilderness into a surveilled, documented, controlled space where every movement, every hunt, every camp gets converted into data and transmitted to people who use that data to kill what sustains you. Sitting Bull doesn't understand telegraphs. Not really. But he understands that the old ways aren't working anymore. That distance isn't protection. That avoiding whites isn't safety. That something fundamental has changed about warfare, about hunting, about survival. In his visions, he sees soldiers falling from the sky like grasshoppers. It's a prophecy of victory, a promise that the Lakota will triumph. And in 1876, at a place called the Little Bighorn, that vision will come true. But the telegraphs? The telegraphs will make sure that victory becomes the beginning of the end. Because you can win the battle. You can even win it spectacularly. But when your enemy can turn your victory into instant nationwide information, when they can mobilize resources against you at the speed of light, when they can transform your greatest triumph into the justification for your destruction, then winning is just another form of losing. And the Lakota are about to learn that lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. 1875. The United States government decides it wants the Black Hills. The Black Hills, Paha Sapa to the Lakota, are sacred territory, guaranteed to the Sioux by the Treaty of 1868. Supposedly permanent, supposedly protected. But then gold is discovered? And when there's gold, treaties become paper. The government offers to buy the Black Hills. The Lakota refuse. The government offers more money. The Lakota still refuse. There are things you don't sell. Sacred places, ancestral lands, the bones of your grandparents. So the government changes strategy. In December 1875, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs sends an order to all Lakota bands. Report to reservations by January 31st, 1876, or be considered hostile. January 31st. In the middle of winter, when the plains are frozen and travel is nearly impossible, when bands are scattered in winter camps trying to survive until spring, it's not an order designed to be obeyed. It's an order designed to be violated, to provide legal justification for military action. And here's where the telegraph becomes crucial. Because this order, this ultimatum, it gets transmitted to every Indian agency, every fort, every military post simultaneously. Within hours, every commander knows, after January 31st, anyone not on a reservation is fair game. The Centennial Campaign. That's what they call it. 1876 is the 100th anniversary of American independence, and the Army is planning to celebrate by crushing the last free Indians on the plains. General George Crook is coordinating 3 massive columns, one from the south under his personal command, one from the west under Colonel John Gibbon, one from the east under General Alfred Terry, and with Terry's column is George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry. These columns are going to move in a coordinated squeeze, converge on the hostile bands from 3 directions, trap them, destroy them. Classic hammer and anvil tactics, but on a scale never before attempted on the plains, and it's all being coordinated through telegraph networks. Crook sends messages to Terry. Terry sends messages to Gibbon. They're synchronizing movements, sharing intelligence. When one column spots Indians, all columns know within hours. It's warfare as conducted by a single distributed brain, with telegraph wires as the neural pathways. At Fort Ellis in Montana Territory, there's a telegraph operator named James Coleman. He's been working the key for 3 years, knows Morse code like his native language. And in the spring of 1876, he's part of the most intensive communications operation the Frontier Army has ever attempted. Messages are flooding through. Scout reports, supply requisitions, movement orders. Coleman is working 16-hour days. His hand cramps from tapping the key. But he keeps sending, keeps receiving, because this is it. This is the big push. Everyone knows it. On June 9th, he receives intelligence from a Crow scout working with Gibbon's column. Large Lakota village spotted near the Little Bighorn River. Very large. Estimate at least 1,000 warriors, maybe more. Coleman sends this information to every relevant post. To Fort Abraham Lincoln, where Custer is preparing to move. To Crook's position in the south, to department headquarters in Chicago. The intelligence spreads like electricity through wire, because that's literally what it is. At Fort Abraham Lincoln, Custer receives this intelligence. 1,000 warriors, maybe more. At least 3,000 people total, probably closer to 5,000, given the ratio of warriors to total population. He's supposed to wait. Coordinate with Gibbon. Let Crook move into position. The plan is to trap the village between 3 columns. Don't engage alone. Wait for support, but Custer has other ideas. He's 46 years old. He's a Civil War hero, youngest general in the Union Army during that conflict. He's famous, he's ambitious, and he believes, genuinely believes, that he can defeat any number of Indians with the 7th Cavalry. More importantly, he wants the glory. Wants the victory to be his alone, not shared with Gibbon or Crook. There are rumors, just rumors, but Custer hears them, that he might be nominated for president at the Democratic Convention. A big victory over the hostiles would help those chances. So when Terry gives him operational independence, tells him to use his judgment, Custer takes that authorization and runs with it. June 24th. James Coleman at Fort Ellis sends an updated message. Village confirmed on Little Bighorn. Size estimates revised upward. At least 3,000 warriors confirmed. Possibly more, 3,000 warriors. Let me put that in context. Custer has about 600 men in the 7th Cavalry. 600 against 3,000 is 5-to-1 odds. No commander in their right mind engages at those odds without support. The message gets to Custer. He reads it, and he divides his command into 3 battalions anyway. He's not waiting, not coordinating. He's attacking. Now, while all this is happening, while the telegraph network is humming with military intelligence, while columns are coordinating, while Coleman is tapping out warnings, Sitting Bull is having a vision. He's performed the sun dance, pierced his flesh, danced for hours, given his body to the Great Spirit. And in his vision, he sees soldiers falling from the sky, falling into the camp, falling upside down like grasshoppers. It's a prophecy, a promise. The soldiers are coming, and they will be defeated. This is the collision we're building toward. 2 forms of intelligence, 2 ways of knowing. The telegraph, technical, precise, data-driven, carrying specific numbers and coordinates at light speed. And the vision, spiritual, symbolic, transmitted through ceremony and faith. Custer believes in the telegraph intelligence, believes in scouts and reports and numbers. But he also believes in his own destiny, believes he's invincible. The telegraph tells him 3,000 warriors, but his ego tells him 3,000 warriors don't matter. Sitting Bull believes in his vision, believes the soldiers will fall. The vision doesn't tell him when or how or what the cost will be. Just that victory's coming. June 25th, 1876. Early morning. Custer's scouts spot the village on the Little Bighorn. It's enormous. The lodges stretch for miles along the river. Thousands of people. Custer looks at this village, looks at the evidence of his eyes that this is a massive gathering, way bigger than expected, and he makes his decision. He divides his command, sends Captain Frederick Benteen with 3 companies on a scouting mission, sends Major Marcus Reno with 3 companies to attack the southern end of the village, takes 5 companies himself to attack from the north. He's dividing his 600 men in the face of thousands of warriors. It's insane. It violates every principle of military tactics. But Custer thinks, genuinely thinks, that he's going to win. Meanwhile, back at the telegraph stations, operators are tapping out routine messages. Supply requisitions, weather reports. No one knows that Custer is attacking right now. The telegraph can carry information at light speed, but only if someone sends it. And Custer isn't sending anything. He's maintaining radio silence or telegraph silence because he doesn't want other columns claiming any of his glory. The Battle of the Little Bighorn lasts about 3 hours from start to finish. Reno attacks the south end of the village and gets driven back, forced to defend a hilltop position. Benteen never finds any Indians on his scouting mission. And Custer, George Armstrong Custer, the boy general, the Indian fighter, the man who believed he was destined for greatness, leads his 5 companies to a ridge overlooking the village and gets surrounded. The warriors, led by Crazy Horse, by Gall, by other tactical geniuses, they use the terrain perfectly. They use the overwhelming numbers. They coordinate without telegraphs, without modern communications, just through traditional methods of hand signals and runner messages and sheer combat experience. In maybe an hour, Custer and all 210 men under his immediate command are dead. Every single one. It's a complete annihilation. Sitting Bull's vision has come true. The soldiers have fallen like grasshoppers. They came into the camp. Well, they tried to, and they fell. Reno and Benteen, defending their hilltop position, can hear the battle. The gunfire, the war cries. They know something terrible is happening. They're pinned down themselves, taking casualties, barely holding on. They're hoping Custer will come relieve them. Custer isn't coming. Custer is dead on a ridge that will later be called Last Stand Hill, and nobody outside of that valley knows any of this yet. Not the army, not the newspapers, not the American public, because the telegraph lines don't reach the Little Bighorn. The wires that connected Crook and Terry and Gibbon, that carried warnings about village size, that coordinated the entire campaign. Those wires end at the forts. Once Custer rode out from Fort Abraham Lincoln, he rode beyond the reach of the telegraph. He was operating in a bubble of communication silence. June 26th. The siege continues. Reno and Benteen are still pinned down, still taking fire, still hoping for relief. The warriors have withdrawn from Custer's position. There's nothing left to do there. Everyone's dead, and they're keeping pressure on the survivors. And then in the evening, the warriors break off, leave. The whole massive village packs up and moves south. Why? Because scouts have reported other soldiers coming. Gibbon's column. Terry's column? The ones Custer was supposed to wait for. June 27th. Terry and Gibbon's forces arrive. Find Reno and Benteen. Find Custer's body and the bodies of all his men. The scale of the disaster becomes clear. Now, and this is important, at this moment, most of the Lakota and Cheyenne warriors in that valley don't know yet that they've just won the most famous Indian victory in American history. They know they won a battle. They know they killed a lot of soldiers. But they don't understand the significance. Don't know Custer's name meant anything special. Don't know that this battle is going to echo through history. The news spreads through the Lakota camps over the next few days. Through traditional means, runners, word of mouth, stories around fires. The village splits up. That many people can't stay together, there isn't enough game, and the story of the battle travels with the bands as they scatter. Meanwhile, Terry is composing a message, writing it out carefully, because this is the message that's going to change everything. June 30th. The survivors and the dead are back at the mouth of the Bighorn River, where a steamboat is waiting. The message goes by courier to Fort Ellis, about 200 miles away. It takes days, July 5th. James Coleman sits down at his telegraph key at Fort Ellis and receives the worst message he's ever transmitted. Custer and 5 companies dead, 210 killed. Reno and Benteen barely survived. Complete disaster, he sends it. Taps it out letter by letter. And then he watches it spread through the telegraph network like wildfire. Within hours, every fort knows. Within a day, newspapers in Chicago and New York are printing extras. Within 2 days, the entire country knows. July 4th is America's centennial celebration. The 100th birthday of independence. Cities are having parades, fireworks, patriotic speeches. Everyone's celebrating American greatness, and then this telegram arrives. This message of disaster, of humiliation, of the famous Custer dead on some Montana battlefield, killed by the very Indians the army was supposed to be crushing. The psychological impact is massive. It's not just a military defeat. It's an affront to American destiny, to the idea that westward expansion is inevitable and righteous. Custer wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol, and the Lakota killed him. The newspapers go crazy. Custer's last stand becomes instant legend. Artists who weren't there draw dramatic pictures of the battle. Writers who know nothing about it compose heroic narratives. Within weeks, the defeat is being transformed into mythology. But here's the thing about mythology. It demands response. It demands vengeance. If Custer is a hero, and the newspapers are making him a hero, saint-like, martyred for civilization, then his death must be avenged. The telegraph messages start flowing the other direction now. From Washington to the plains, mobilize, send reinforcements, crush the hostiles. Whatever it takes, Sitting Bull's vision came true. The soldiers fell like grasshoppers. But the telegraph is about to make that victory into a death sentence for his people. In the Lakota camps, there's celebration. They won. They defeated the Bluecoats. They proved that they can still fight, still defend themselves, still make the whites bleed. But some of the older leaders are worried. They understand something the younger warriors don't. They understand that the whites don't give up. That defeat doesn't make them quit. It makes them angry, and angry whites with telegraphs are the most dangerous thing on the plains. Captain Frederick Benteen, recovering from his wounds, sits at a telegraph station and writes a report. He describes what happened, the tactical mistakes, the dividing of the command, the underestimation of enemy numbers. And then he writes something revealing. We expected relief. We knew the telegraph would bring help. But we never imagined Custer would be so completely destroyed that no one could report what happened. Read that carefully. Benteen expected telegraphs to save them, expected the network to know they were in trouble, expected instant communication to provide instant rescue, but the telegraphs didn't know. Couldn't know. Because Custer rode beyond the wires. He left the network, and outside the network, events happen in isolation. Victory or defeat occurs in silence. The Little Bighorn was the telegraph's greatest failure. All that intelligence, all those warnings, all that coordination, and it still ended in disaster because one man believed his destiny mattered more than data. But it's also the telegraph's greatest triumph. Because that failure, that spectacular, dramatic, legendary failure, traveled at light speed to every corner of the country, became instant news. Instant outrage, instant justification for total war. The Lakota won the battle in 3 hours. The telegraph won the war in 3 days, not through any military action, just through the speed of information, the transformation of defeat into propaganda, the mobilization of public opinion and political will. Sitting Bull's vision showed him soldiers falling. It didn't show him what came after. It didn't show him the messages flying through copper wires, the orders, the troop movements, the supplies, the implacable electric vengeance that was already forming before the bodies on Last Stand Hill were even cold. Lightning fell at the Little Bighorn, and thunder was coming. Thunder carried on singing wires, thunder that would never stop until every free band was broken, every great leader dead or imprisoned, every promise of the old way of life destroyed. The warriors celebrated their victory, and the telegraphs planned their doom. Winter 1876. The Lakota call it the Winter of Desperation. After the Little Bighorn, the great village broke apart. Had to. 7,000 people can't stay together through winter. Not enough game, not enough forage for the horses. So the band scattered, moved to traditional winter camps, tried to prepare for the cold months ahead. They thought they'd have time. Thought the army would do what armies always did, go into winter quarters. Wait for spring. Nobody fights major campaigns in Plains winter. The weather is too brutal. The cold kills. The snow makes movement nearly impossible. Except Colonel Nelson Miles doesn't care about tradition. He doesn't believe in winter quarters. And he's got something the Lakota don't have, portable telegraph equipment. Miles is young, 37 years old, in 1876. He's ambitious. He's ruthless. And he's figured something out that's about to change everything. He's realized that you can bring the telegraph network with you into the field. There's a technology called the field telegraph. Lighter weight wire, portable poles, equipment that can be packed on mules and set up quickly. It's been used in the Civil War, but mostly for static positions. Siege lines, established camps, Miles takes it mobile. His columns move with telegraph equipment. When they stop, they string wire back to the nearest permanent station. Suddenly he's got communications in the field, not just at forts, not just at established posts, but wherever his troops are operating. Think about what this means tactically. Before, when a column went into the field, it was isolated, cut off, dependent on couriers and runners. If you needed reinforcements, you sent a rider back to the fort. 2 days travel? Maybe 3. Then 2 or 3 days for the reinforcements to arrive. A week minimum. Now Miles can telegraph for support and have it arriving the next day. He can coordinate multiple columns in real time. He can adjust strategy based on fresh intelligence delivered by wire. The Lakota bands are trying to winter in peace. But there is no peace. Miles's columns keep coming. Attack a camp, drive the people away, destroy their lodges and supplies, force them to move in winter when movement means death, when children and elders can't survive the cold and the constant displacement. November 1876. Miles catches up to Sitting Bull's band on the Yellowstone River. Sitting Bull meets with Miles under a flag of truce, tries to negotiate, tries to explain that his people just want to be left alone, to live as they always have. Miles offers terms, surrender and go to a reservation or be hunted. Sitting Bull refuses. He's not going to put his people on a reservation, not going to accept being confined and controlled. He's a free man. His people are free people. The whites don't own the earth. The meeting ends. Both sides prepare to fight. And while they're preparing, Miles's telegraph operators are sending messages, stringing wire as fast as they can, connecting this temporary camp to Fort Kearny, from Fort Kearny to department headquarters, from headquarters to supply depots. By the time the skirmishing starts, it's not a major battle, more of a running fight. Miles already has reinforcements en route, already has supplies being shipped. The telegraph has turned a single colonel's column into a node in a network that can draw resources from across the entire military infrastructure. Sitting Bull breaks contact, moves his people north, and Miles follows. Not immediately. He doesn't have to. His Crow Scouts report Sitting Bull's direction of travel. The scouts get the information to the telegraph. The telegraph transmits it to other posts. Other columns adjust their positions. It's like, and I want you to really visualize this, it's like being hunted by something that's everywhere at once. The Lakota move north, and somehow soldiers appear from the west. They dodge east and troops are already there. They try to hide their trail, but Crow Scouts find them, and telegraph stations relay their location before they've gone 10 miles. December 1876. Crazy Horse is wintering his band on the Powder River, trying to keep his people alive. Food is scarce. The buffalo herds are scattered, hunted hard by commercial hunters who've been using telegraph coordinates to find and slaughter them all summer. The game that used to sustain a band through winter is just gone. Miles's scouts find them. The information goes by field telegraph to Miles, from Miles to Fort Kearny, from Fort Kearny to other commands. Within a day, multiple columns are moving to converge on Crazy Horse's position. Crazy Horse has to move. In winter, his people pack what they can, abandon what they can't carry, and run. Some of the elderly can't make the journey. Some of the children are too weak. They die in the snow? Because there's no time to stop, no time to rest, no time to grieve properly. This is what the telegraph has made possible. Not just warfare, but the systematic prevention of survival. The transformation of the entire landscape into a hunting ground, where there's no safe place, no hidden refuge, no escape from electric eyes. At Fort Kearny, the telegraph office is running day and night shifts, operators in 6-hour rotations. The messages never stop. Scout reports, supply updates, movement orders, intelligence on every Lakota and Cheyenne band within 300 miles. There's a woman at Fort Kearny, Mary. She's married to an officer who keeps a diary. In January 1877, she writes, "The telegraph key clicks constantly, day and night. Click, click, click. It sounds like a mechanical heartbeat. Like the fort itself is alive and thinking. She's more right than she knows. The fort is thinking. The network is alive. It's a distributed intelligence that never sleeps, never stops, never loses track of its targets. Pretty Shield is a crow woman living through this winter. Her people are allies of the whites, or at least they're enemies of the Lakota, which amounts to the same thing in 1876. She watches Lakota refugees fleeing through the snow, women carrying children, old people struggling to walk, wounded warriors trying to protect families. Years later, she'll talk about this time. She'll say, "We helped the white soldiers. We scouted for them. We told them where the Sioux were. We thought we were making our people safe. But when I saw those Lakota women in the snow, carrying their children, running from soldiers we had sent to them, I wondered what we had done. The ancient rivalries between Plains tribes, Crow versus Lakota, Pawnee versus Sioux, the whites have weaponized them, electrified them, turned traditional enmity into an intelligence apparatus." January 8th, 1877. The Battle of Wolf Mountain. Crazy Horse leads about 500 warriors against Miles's column. It's a running battle in a blizzard. Snow so thick you can barely see. Wind so cold it freezes exposed skin in minutes. Crazy Horse is fighting brilliantly, using the terrain, using the weather. He knows if he can hold off Miles until nightfall, they can break contact, escape in the storm, survive to fight another day. But Miles is receiving hourly telegraph updates. Not from the battlefield. His field telegraph can't work in these conditions. The snow is too heavy. But from Fort Kearny, reinforcements are coming. Fresh troops with fresh supplies. They're riding through the blizzard because the telegraph told them exactly where to go and exactly when to arrive. Crazy Horse can see the battle in front of him, can count the soldiers he's facing, can calculate whether his warriors can win this fight. But he can't see the messages flying through copper wires 50 miles away. Can't see the reinforcements being vectored to his position. Can't see the network coordinating his destruction. The reinforcements arrive at dusk. Crazy Horse breaks off. His band melts into the storm. They've survived, but barely, and they can't keep doing this. Can't keep running. Can't keep fighting. The children are starving. The elderly are dying. The horses are weak. This is Miles's strategy. He calls it total winter war. Deny the hostiles any rest, any safety, any chance to recover. Keep them moving until they're too weak to fight, too desperate to resist, until surrender becomes the only option, and the telegraph makes it possible. Because you can't fight a winter campaign without communications, without being able to call for supplies when you need them, without being able to coordinate with other columns, without being able to receive intelligence about enemy movements. The Lakota can fight without telegraphs. They've been doing it for generations. But they can't survive being fought by telegraphs. Can't survive being the target of a network that never forgets, never sleeps, never loses track. March 1877. Red Cloud Agency in Nebraska. The agency is on a reservation, officially neutral ground. a place where Lakota who've accepted reservation life are supposed to live in peace. General George Crook arrives with a heavy military escort. He's there to negotiate Crazy Horse's surrender. The word has gone out through traditional channels, runners, messengers, that Crook wants to talk terms. That if Crazy Horse surrenders, his people will be treated fairly, but simultaneously, Crook is sending telegraph messages back to his headquarters. Messages that paint a very different picture. Messages about the need for strict discipline and firm control of hostile Indians. Messages recommending that Crazy Horse and other leaders be imprisoned, possibly executed, as examples. Crazy Horse doesn't know about these messages. Can't know. He's negotiating in good faith, trying to get the best terms possible for his people. And Crook is negotiating in bad faith, making promises by voice that he's contradicting by wire. This is what the telegraph enables. Dual communication. Say one thing to the Indians in person. Say something else to Washington by wire. The Indians hear promises. Washington hears plans for subjugation. And the Indians have no way to know about the contradiction because they can't read the telegraph messages. April 1877. Sitting Bull makes his choice. He's not surrendering. He's taking his people north to Canada, to Grandmother's Land. That's what the Lakota call it because Queen Victoria rules there. It's a desperate move. Canada is foreign territory, unknown, but it's also outside the reach of American telegraphs. The telegraph network stops at the border. Beyond that line there are no singing wires, no invisible eyes, no electric hunters. Sitting Bull leads about 400 lodges, maybe 2,000 people on a march north. They're not running, not fleeing in panic. They're migrating, deliberately, with dignity, refusing to accept American terms. They cross into Canada in May, and for the first time in years, they're not being tracked by telegraphs. The Canadian Telegraph Network exists, but it's not integrated with American military intelligence. The Crow Scouts report to American posts, not Canadian ones. The information network that's been hunting them for years just stops. It must feel like magic, like they've crossed into a spirit realm where the white man's electric medicine doesn't work. One day they're being tracked, hunted, monitored. The next day they're invisible again. Of course, it's not permanent sanctuary. Can't be. Canada won't let them hunt buffalo across the border. Won't let them raid American settlements. Won't feed them when they're starving. It's refuge, but it's also a trap. A place where they can't be attacked, but also can't live. Still, for Sitting Bull, for his people, it's worth it. Because the alternative is surrender. Reservation life. Being counted and controlled and confined. At least in Canada, they're still free. Even if freedom means hunger. May 6, 1877. Crazy Horse comes into Red Cloud Agency to surrender. He's bringing about 900 people. He's negotiated terms. His people will be allowed to settle near the agency, to keep some of their horses, to maintain some autonomy. Touch the Clouds, a mini-Konju chief who's already on the reservation, greets him. They clasp hands. Touch the Clouds says, "My friend has come in. I am glad." "I'm very glad." The agency telegraph operator sends a message to Fort Robinson, to department headquarters, to Washington. Crazy Horse surrendered today with 900 hostiles. All ponies and weapons to be confiscated. Leaders under close watch, confiscated. Under close watch. Those weren't the terms promised. Those weren't the agreements made. But those are the terms being implemented, transmitted by wire before Crazy Horse even knows they've changed. The telegraph messages continue. Over the summer, officials in Washington are reading reports about Crazy Horse, that he's restless, that he might flee the reservation, that he's dangerous, that he represents a threat to the peace. These messages are shaping policy, shaping decisions. And Crazy Horse has no idea they exist. Has no idea that every time he talks to his friends about missing the old life, about hunting, about freedom, someone reports it. Someone sends it by telegraph to people who are deciding his fate. September 5th, 1877. Crazy Horse is arrested. The official reason is that he's planning to flee the reservation. The real reason is that he's too influential, too respected, Too likely to inspire resistance, they take him to the guardhouse at Fort Robinson. He resists, tries to fight free. A soldier, little big man, ironically, a Lakota working as an agency policeman, grabs him. Another soldier, a white man, bayonets him. Crazy Horse dies that night. He's 36 years old, one of the greatest military leaders in Plains history. Killed by a bayonet while being arrested on a reservation. Touch the Clouds is there when he dies, holds his hand, and afterward, Touch the Clouds makes a statement that gets recorded, translated, sent by telegraph. My friend is no more. He has died for his people. The telegraph key clicks out those words. Another hostile chief secured. That's how it's transmitted to Washington. Not Crazy Horse is dead. Not we've killed one of the greatest warriors on the plains. Just another hostile chief secured. By the end of 1877, the free bands are gone, dead surrendered or fled to Canada. The great Lakota resistance is broken, scattered. The people who controlled the northern plains for generations are on reservations. Counted, monitored, controlled. The telegraph didn't defeat them in battle. The Lakota won most of their battles, but the telegraph defeated them strategically. Made it impossible to rest, impossible to hide, impossible to survive outside the reservation system. The singing wires had sung the Lakota into captivity, and the songs weren't stopping. They were just changing, becoming songs of surveillance, of bureaucratic control, of a different kind of warfare that would last another generation. The lightning net had closed, and it would never open again. 1877 through 1890. 13 years! That's how long the reservations exist before everything explodes again. But it's a different kind of existence. Not warfare, not resistance in the traditional sense. It's something harder to describe, harder to endure. At Standing Rock Reservation in Dakota Territory, there's an Indian agent named James McLaughlin. He's married to a Lakota woman, speaks some of the language, considers himself sympathetic to Indian welfare, and he's got a telegraph office in his agency headquarters that he uses like a surveillance tool. Every morning, McLaughlin receives reports from agency police, Lakota men working for the government, from traders, from missionaries. Reports about who's meeting with whom, who's talking about the old days, who seems restless, who might be planning trouble. He writes these reports into official documents and sends them by telegraph to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in Washington. Daily reports, sometimes multiple messages per day. Sitting Bull gets mentioned constantly. Subject number 37 in McLaughlin's filing system, just a number. A case to be managed. Sitting Bull lives on Standing Rock Reservation. He came back from Canada in 1881, surrendered because his people were starving. Because Canada wouldn't let them hunt, because there was nowhere left to go. He traded freedom for survival, and he's been regretting it ever since. McLaughlin watches him constantly, reads his mail. Yes, some Lakota have learned to write letters, and yes, the agent reads them before they're delivered, monitors his visitors, tracks his movements around the reservation, and telegraphs all of it to Washington. This is what the telegraph has become on the reservations. Not a military tool anymore, a bureaucratic one, a way to reduce human beings to administrative data, to transform chiefs and warriors into case numbers and surveillance reports. Sitting Bull knows he's being watched. Everyone knows they're being watched. The agency police are everywhere. The missionaries report back to McLaughlin. Even other Lakota, people who've accepted reservation life, who want to avoid trouble. They sometimes inform on those who resist. It's suffocating, claustrophobic. You can't meet with friends without it being reported. Can't talk about the old days without someone sending a telegram to Washington saying you're hostile or dangerous. The singing wires that used to track war parties now track conversations. But then, in 1889, something starts spreading across the reservations. Something the telegraphs can't track. Can't monitor. Can't stop a religion. The ghost dance. A Paiute prophet named Wovoka, living in Nevada, has had a vision. In this vision, the Great Spirit showed him a new world coming. A world where the dead would return, where the buffalo would come back, where the whites would disappear and Indians would live as they once did, free, abundant, whole. And there's a ceremony to bring this vision into reality. A dance, the ghost dance, dance for days. Dance until you enter trance states. Dance until you see visions. Dance until you connect with the dead, with the returning world, with hope. The ghost dance spreads from reservation to reservation. Not by telegraph, not by mail, not by any channel the government controls. It spreads through traditional networks, travelers, visiting relatives, whispered conversations, prayer. The authorities hate it. Hate that they can't monitor it, can't control it, can't predict it. McLaughlin sends frantic telegrams to Washington. Religious movement spreading at Standing Rock, unable to determine extent. Sitting Bull appears to be involved. Recommend immediate action. Other agents send similar messages. From Pine Ridge, from Rosebud, from Cheyenne River, all across the plains. Indian agents are telegraphing warnings about this dance that promises the end of white civilization. In autumn 1890, a northern Arapaho named Kicking Bear visits Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He's been to see Wovoka, learned the dance, received the prophecy, and he brings something else. Ghost shirts. These are special shirts, painted with sacred symbols, worn during the dance. And Kicking Bear teaches that these shirts are bulletproof. That if soldiers come, if violence erupts, the ghost shirts will protect the dancers. The bullets will pass through them harmlessly. Now think about what this means psychologically. For 15 years, the Lakota have lived under the constant threat of military force. The memory of being hunted by telegraph-coordinated columns. The knowledge that resistance means death. And here's a promise that the old power is returning. That spiritual medicine is stronger than bullets. That hope is possible again. Thousands of Lakota at Pine Ridge start dancing. Day and night. The agent there, Daniel Royer, is terrified. He sends telegrams. Lots of telegrams. Indians are dancing in the snow and are wild and crazy, unable to control situation. Request military assistance immediately. The telegraphs carry panic at light speed. Washington reads these messages, stripped of context, full of fear, and makes decisions. Send troops. Arrest the leaders. Stop the dancing. November 1890. The army mobilizes. Thousands of soldiers move toward the reservations. It's the largest military deployment since the 1870s, all because of a dance, a religious ceremony, a desperate grasp at hope by people who have nothing else left. The telegraph messages multiply, orders, troop movements, lists of hostile leaders to be arrested. And at the top of almost every list, Sitting Bull, December 14th, 1890. McLaughlin sends a telegram to the commissioner. Will arrest Sitting Bull tomorrow morning before daylight. Have arranged for Indian police to make arrest with military support nearby. Expect resistance. The order came from Washington by telegraph, through multiple relay stations, encoded in bureaucratic language. But it's a death warrant. Everyone knows it. You don't arrest Sitting Bull before daylight with expectation of resistance, unless you're prepared for him to die. December 15th, 1890. 4:30 in the morning. Still dark. 43 Indian police surround Sitting Bull's cabin on Standing Rock Reservation. They're led by Lieutenant Bullhead, a Lakota. Other Lakota. Arresting a Lakota chief on orders transmitted by telegraph from white authorities 1,000 miles away. They knock, enter, arrest him. Sitting Bull is 59 years old. He's lived through the height of Lakota power, through the wars, through the surrender, through 15 years of reservation life. And now he's being arrested by his own people for participating in a dance. His followers gather outside. Over 100 people. Lakota who still believe in him, who still respect him, who don't want to see him taken away. The tension builds. Someone fires a shot. Then everyone's shooting. In the chaos, Bullhead shoots Sitting Bull. Another policeman, Red Tomahawk, shoots him in the back of the head. The great chief falls. The man who won at the Little Bighorn, who preserved his people's freedom longer than anyone thought possible, who resisted becoming a number in someone's filing system. He dies in front of his cabin, shot by Lakota police following orders sent by telegraph. The violence spreads. 6 police are killed. 8 of Sitting Bull's followers die, and then cavalry arrive. They were stationed nearby, just in case. And the survivors scatter. By December 16th, telegraph messages about Sitting Bull's death are reaching every agency, every fort, every newspaper. The man has been dead less than 24 hours, and already the story is being told across the country. Hostile chief killed while resisting arrest. That's the official version. That's what the telegraphs transmit. At Pine Ridge Reservation, a mini-Konju chief named Bigfoot hears about Sitting Bull's death. He's been dancing the ghost dance with his people. He's on the list of leaders to be arrested. And he knows what happened to Sitting Bull will happen to him if he stays, so he runs, takes his band, about 350 people, mostly women and children, and flees toward Pine Ridge. Maybe the Red Cloud Agency will protect them. Maybe they can find safety there. The army tracks them. Not with the old telegraph surveillance network. That's less effective now. Scouts aren't reporting as reliably. But they don't need scouts. Bigfoot's band is moving in winter, across open ground, leaving obvious trails. And more importantly, Agent Royer at Pine Ridge is telegraphing constant updates about where refugee bands are heading. December 28th, 1890. The 7th Cavalry intercepts Bigfoot's band near Wounded Knee Creek. The 7th Cavalry. Custer's old regiment. They still remember the Little Bighorn, still want revenge for that humiliation 14 years ago. Bigfoot is sick, pneumonia, bleeding from the nose. He's riding in a wagon because he's too weak to sit a horse. This is the dangerous hostile the army has been hunting. A dying old man trying to protect his people. The cavalry surrounds the camp, sets up Hotchkiss guns, small artillery pieces, on the hills overlooking the creek. The commander, Colonel James Forsyth, orders the Lakota to give up their weapons. All weapons. Complete disarmament, the Lakota comply. Mostly, they turn over rifles. But the soldiers aren't satisfied. They search the lodges, search the people, looking for hidden weapons. The situation is tense, frightened. 500 soldiers surrounding 350 starving, freezing refugees. December 29th, 1890. Morning, the soldiers are collecting the last weapons. A medicine man named Yellowbird is dancing, singing ghost dance songs, reminding people that the ghost shirts will protect them, that the bullets can't harm them. A young Lakota man, deaf, doesn't hear the orders being shouted at him, raises his rifle above his head. Maybe he's surrendering it. Maybe he's just confused. A soldier tries to take it. They struggle. The rifle discharges, and then everyone's shooting. The Hotchkiss guns open up. 2-pound explosive shells tearing into lodges, into people. The cavalry is firing with rifles, with pistols. They're shooting at anything that moves. Men, women, children. It doesn't matter. This isn't a battle. It's a massacre. Bigfoot dies in the first minutes. Shot multiple times. Falls out of his wagon into the snow. The ghost shirts don't stop bullets. They never did. They were hope-made cloth, and hope doesn't stop lead. Some Lakota fight back. Those who still have weapons. They kill about 25 soldiers, but they're overwhelmingly outgunned. The Hotchkiss guns keep firing. Keep shredding the camp. Keep killing. When it's over, and it doesn't take long, maybe an hour, about 300 Lakota are dead. 2/3 of Bigfoot's band. Most of them women and children. Bodies scattered in the snow. Frozen in the positions they died. Some crawled away to die in gullies. Some died trying to protect their children. A blizzard comes that night. Covers the bodies. Covers the blood. When burial parties arrive 3 days later, they find corpses frozen solid. They pile them in a mass grave. Bigfoot's body, frozen in a sitting position from the rigor mortis, goes in with the others. And the telegraph messages go out. Same day as the massacre. Engagement at Wounded Knee Creek. Hostile band destroyed. Army casualties light. Operation successful. That's what gets transmitted. That's the official story that travels at light speed to Washington, to newspapers, to the American public. Hostile band destroyed. Not massacre of refugees, not murder of women and children. Just a successful military operation. Some of the correspondents there, newspaper, reporters who saw what happened, they try to file accurate stories, try to describe what they witnessed. But their stories come later, travel slower, get less attention than the official military telegrams. The first narrative wins. The telegraph narrative, the one that frames Wounded Knee as a battle, as a victory, as the final defeat of hostile Indians. Wounded Knee is the end. The final military action of the Indian Wars. After this, there's no more armed resistance, no more war parties, no more battles. The ghost dance promised a new world. Instead, it brought death at Wounded Knee Creek. The telegraphs played their part, not in the killing directly, but in the surveillance that tracked Sitting Bull, in the panic that McLaughlin and Royer transmitted to Washington, in the orders that came back, arrest the leaders, stop the dancing, use force if necessary, and in the story that got told afterward, the official version, transmitted instantly, accepted as truth before anyone could question it. The singing wires had been tools of military conquest, then tools of surveillance. Now they were tools of narrative control, shaping how history would remember these events, determining whose version of the story would be heard first, fastest, loudest. Red Tomahawk, the man who shot Sitting Bull, lives another 40 years. He'll eventually talk about that morning, about following orders, about being told by telegraph that Sitting Bull was dangerous, hostile, needed to be arrested, about believing the authorities knew things he didn't. Only later does he learn that the authorities were reacting to ghost dancing, to prayer, to hope. That the threat Sitting Bull posed was that he gave people hope. That the reason he had to die was that he refused to be number 37 in someone's filing system. Red Tomahawk will say, "I was part of a Wire's plan. I didn't know it then, but the Wire decided Sitting Bull would die. I was just the hand that pulled the trigger." The ghost dancers believed their shirts would stop bullets. They were wrong, but they were right that something spiritual was needed to resist. Because the telegraphs weren't just technology, they were a system, a network of control that reduced everything to data, everyone to numbers, every act of resistance to a problem to be solved. You can't fight a network with bullets. You can't dance a telegraph away. The Lakota learned that at Wounded Knee, the hard way. The final way, the singing wires had won, and they were still singing. But now they were singing over graves. After 1891, after the guns fall silent and the ghost dance ends, and Wounded Knee becomes a name that will haunt American history, after all of that, something unexpected starts happening. The soldiers who operated those telegraphs start writing their memoirs. And in those memoirs, in the private journals that get published, in the letters that get donated to historical societies, the truth starts emerging. Not the official version, not the narrative that got transmitted at light speed during the conflicts, but what actually happened, what the telegraphs were actually used for. Charles Eastman reads these accounts with growing horror. Eastman is Santee Sioux, born Ohiesa in 1858, raised traditionally until age 15. Then educated in white schools, Dartmouth, Boston University Medical School. By the 19-teens, he's Dr. Charles Eastman, physician, author, reformer, living between two worlds, accepted in white society but never forgetting where he came from. And he's reading these military memoirs that do these accounts by telegraph operators and cavalry officers, and he's understanding, for the first time, why his people lost, not because they were worse fighters. They won most of their battles, not because they lacked courage or skill or tactical brilliance. They had all of that in abundance, but because they were fighting an enemy that could see them constantly, coordinate instantly, respond overwhelmingly. An enemy connected by wires that carried information faster than any scout could ride. Eastman writes about this, tries to explain it to his people and to white audiences. He says, "We were fighting the future. We didn't know it. We thought we were fighting soldiers and settlers, but we were fighting information itself. And you cannot shoot information." In the 1920s, some of the warriors who survived, old men now, living on reservations, memories of the wars fading with their youth, they start learning what the telegraphs had done. Red Tomahawk is one of them, the man who killed Sitting Bull. He's shown some of the telegraph messages that came before that arrest. The orders from Washington, the surveillance reports from McLaughlin, The classification of Sitting Bull as Subject 37, the bureaucratic reduction of a great chief to a case file. He realizes he was a pawn, not in some grand conspiracy, just in a system, a network of information and power that used him, used Indian police, used everyone as tools to achieve predetermined outcomes. Red Tomahawk says, "They made me think I was making a choice, but the choice was made in Washington, sent by wire to Standing Rock. By the time I pulled the trigger, I was just completing someone else's decision." Other old warriors have similar realizations, that the battles they fought so bravely, the victories they won so completely, all of it was being tracked, analyzed, turned into data that shaped strategy against them. That every cut telegraph line told the army exactly where they were. That every movement near a wire generated intelligence that brought cavalry. They were being hunted by a system they couldn't see, fighting an opponent that was everywhere and nowhere, resisting a network that turned their own actions into weapons against them. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. By the 1920s, some young Indians are being trained as telegraph operators. It's one of the jobs available on reservations. The Bureau of Indian Affairs needs communicators, needs people who can work the keys, maintain the lines, relay messages, and some Lakota youth take these jobs, learn Morse code, learn the technology that hunted their grandparents, and they start doing something unexpected with it. They start encoding Lakota words in Morse code. It's simple enough. Morse is just dots and dashes representing sounds. There's no reason those sounds have to be English. So these young operators, communicating between reservations, between agencies, they start inserting Lakota words into their messages. Lakota names, Lakota phrases, using the conqueror's tool to preserve the conquered language. The Bureau supervisors don't like it. Send reprimands. Use only English on official communications, but the operators find ways around it. Personal messages after official business. Training sessions, where they practice with Lakota text, slowly, quietly, turning the telegraph from a tool of control into a tool of preservation. It's a small thing, tiny, but it matters, because it represents understanding, the realization that technology isn't inherently oppressive, that the same tool that tracked and hunted and controlled can be used differently, can be claimed, can be transformed. The years pass. Telegraph gives way to telephone. Telephone gives way to radio. Radio gives way to television. The technology changes, but the fundamental dynamic remains. Information moving faster than traditional methods can match. Networks connecting distant points. Surveillance becoming easier and more pervasive. 1973. Wounded Knee again. The American Indian Movement, AIM, occupies the site of the 1890 massacre. They're protesting corrupt reservation governments, broken treaties, centuries of oppression. It's a 71-day standoff. Federal marshals surround them. FBI agents are on site. The military is watching. Dennis Banks is one of the AIM leaders there. Ojibwe, not Lakota, but committed to the struggle. And during the occupation, he discovers something disturbing. The FBI is using the same tactics the Army used a century earlier. Electronic surveillance, wiretaps, informants whose reports get radioed instantly to command centers. The mapping of movements, the tracking of individuals, the coordination of overwhelming force through instant communication networks. Banks reads about the 1870s telegraph surveillance while the occupation is ongoing. Reads about Sitting Bull being tracked as Subject 37. Reads about scouts reporting to telegraph stations. And he realizes we're living the same story. Different technology. Same strategy. The FBI has infiltrators in the movement. People who report conversations, plans, internal debates. Those reports go by radio and phone to FBI offices. Get analyzed. Get used to predict AIM actions. To prepare responses. To control the narrative. It's the telegraph system updated for the 1970s. More sophisticated. More invasive. But fundamentally the same. Using information networks to maintain control over people resisting that control. The Wounded Knee occupation ends. AIM doesn't win, not in any tactical sense, but they get attention. forced conversations about treaty rights, about sovereignty, about justice. The network that surveilled them also broadcast their message. The same technology that tracked them spread their story. Fast forward to 2016. Standing Rock Reservation again. Another protest, this time against the Dakota Access Pipeline, an oil pipeline that's supposed to cross the Missouri River just upstream from the reservation, threatening water supplies, crossing sacred sites, violating treaty boundaries. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard is one of the organizers. Lakota historian, descendant of survivors of the Indian Wars. She knows the history, knows about the telegraph surveillance, knows about Wounded Knee, both Wounded Knees, and she uses the internet, social media, live streaming, instant communication with journalists worldwide. The pipeline protests organized through Facebook, document police actions through Twitter. Stream confrontations live to millions of viewers. The surveillance network that once only served power now connects resistance movements globally. The authorities try to control the narrative, issue press releases, hold official briefings, but they can't control social media, can't stop live streams, can't prevent protesters from broadcasting their own story at the same speed, faster even, than official versions. For the first time, maybe ever, the information network advantage flows both ways. The descendants of people who were tracked and hunted by telegraphs are using digital networks to organize, to resist, to tell their own stories without official mediation. It doesn't mean they win. The pipeline gets built. Money and political power still matter more than justice. But they fight with information tools that their ancestors couldn't access. They turn surveillance networks into broadcasting networks. They use the speed of digital communication to mobilize global solidarity. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard says in an interview, "My ancestors were hunted by talking wires, tracked by technology they couldn't understand. But we understand this technology. We can use it. We can make it serve our purposes, not just their purposes." Today, right now, Lakota and Dakota people are stringing fiber optic cables across their reservations, building their own internet infrastructure, faster than the telegraph, more powerful than radio, carrying language lessons, cultural programs, traditional stories at the speed of light. The same reservations that were once surveilled by telegraph networks now have indigenous-controlled communication networks. The descendants of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and Red Cloud are running their own data centers, teaching their children through video conferences, preserving their languages through digital archives. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe operates its own telecommunications company. The Oglala Lakota manage their own internet service provider. These are small operations, struggling operations, under-resourced compared to major telecoms. But they exist, they persist, and there's something profound about that. About the great-great-grandchildren of people tracked by singing wires, now controlling their own digital infrastructure. About technology that was once a tool of conquest, becoming a tool of cultural survival. The story of the telegraph and the Lakota isn't just history. It's a lesson about technology and power, about how communication networks can be used to control, to surveil, to dominate. But also about how those same networks can be claimed, transformed, used for resistance and preservation. The Lakota didn't lose because they were inferior. They lost because they were fighting an enemy that could think faster, communicate instantly, coordinate globally. They lost because information itself became a weapon. But their descendants learned, adapted, figured out that you don't reject technology, you claim it. You understand it. You use it for your own purposes. You transform tools of control into tools of sovereignty. The singing wires that once tracked Crazy Horse now carry his stories to Lakota children in classrooms. The networks that coordinated the destruction of buffalo now stream powwows to tribal members scattered across the country. The surveillance systems that reduce Sitting Bull to Subject 37 now preserve his speeches, his wisdom, his legacy in digital archives that can never be lost. It's not victory, not in the sense of undoing what was done. The buffalo are still mostly gone. The treaties are still broken. The sacred lands are still occupied. The people are still dealing with poverty, addiction, injustice, the ongoing consequences of conquest and colonization. But it's survival, it's adaptation, it's the refusal to be erased, and it's the understanding that technology is never neutral. It serves whoever controls it, and control can shift, can be contested, can be claimed by people who were once its targets. The old warriors couldn't see the telegraph network that hunted them, couldn't understand the invisible web of information that coordinated their destruction. But their descendants see the digital networks that surround us all, understand how information flows, how data becomes power, how networks can be used for control or for liberation, and they're building their own networks, their own infrastructures, their own digital drums. The singing wires evolved into fiber optics. The telegraph surveillance became internet monitoring. The technology changed, but the fundamental truth remains. Whoever controls the network controls the narrative. Whoever can communicate fastest can coordinate most effectively. Whoever understands the system can use it, resist it, or transform it. The Lakota learned that lesson through blood and loss and generations of suffering. Their descendants remember it, live it, use it. The wires that once carried death now carry life. Stories, language, memory, identity, resistance, survival. That's not the ending anyone would have predicted in 1890, but it's the ending that's being written right now by people who refuse to let technology define their future, who claim the tools that once defeated them and make those tools serve their survival. The lightning learned to whisper. The whisper became a network. The network became a weapon. And the weapon, slowly, painfully, gradually, became a drum, beating in digital rhythm, carrying the old songs into the future. That's the story of the singing wires. From conquest to control to reclamation, from death messages to life-affirming, from hunting tools to healing tools, the story isn't over. It never is. As long as people remember, resist, and adapt. As long as descendants honor ancestors by understanding what defeated them and claiming what can liberate them, the wires sing on. But now sometimes they sing Lakota songs.